What's up? This is Stephan Hogan. Welcome back to the Stephan Hogan podcast. And it is great to have you here. Please hit subscribe, follow, like, share. Follow me on social media at Stephan Hogan, P-H-A-N. People always get confused on that. I almost wish my name was spelled S-T-E-F-A-N. That's what I did on my Starbucks app. And this is not sponsored by Starbucks. But I put S-T-E-F-A-N because they always call me Steven. So, with that said, and without further ado, today is 10 for 10. 10 for 10. What does that mean? Well, I'm going to go through the last 10 episodes, and I'm going to tell you my favorite little pieces and little things and little secrets about them. We're going to start with Vince Gill. Imagine showing up to Vince Gill's personal home, unloading your stuff. Well, first, he answers the door, kind of disheveled, in a Vince Gill, chill, I'm at my house way. And he's like, come on in. Says hi, give him a hug. And you got to realize, when I met Vince Gill, I didn't intentionally do a lot of research on his background and history, because I like to meet people and learn about them without all of the outside data that could shape my opinion of them, and I try not to be starstruck. But Vince Gill, to this day, I still kind of get starstruck, because when you're Vince Gill and you are the male country musician with the most Grammys in the history of country music, 22 Grammys, and he's out with my favorite band of all time, the Eagles, you're like, wow, it's just hard to fathom. And so we get in there, we start setting up. He offers to help. How can I help you? Just let me know. So chill. Puts a hat on, to cover up his messy hair. And we sit down to do the podcast, and my heart's beating, because this is one of our first episodes, and I'm like, man, I am in over my head. However, luckily, the backstory is me and him have had breakfast together multiple times, and since moving to Nashville, and we've talked on the phone a bit, and he's been a mentor to me and just shared stories. So I felt like going into the interview, I knew some things I could ask him that other people wouldn't ask him. And I think that people always think of celebrities as what they do for a living. And I said in the beginning of the interview, I said, I want this to be about Vince Gill, the person, not Vince Gill, the musician. Now, obviously, they're very intertwined, but I think that it's important to understand that was kind of my goal. And I'm sitting on this brown couch. He's sitting next to me. I know for a fact that on that brown couch, Chris Stapleton had sat there and wrote songs with him before, and a lot of other huge artists. And I'm thinking about all the people who sat on it. I'm surrounded by his guitar collection. The room smells like old guitars, but in a good way, and fresh at the same time. Temperature's just right, probably, because of the guitars. And so we just start talking. And as we get into the interview, we talk about what makes something valuable and have value or not. He says, I like what I'm doing now more than, and he said it goes largely unnoticed, more than what I was doing when I was at the height of my career, when the whole world was noticing. However, the results aren't the same. He's not getting platinum records anymore, but he says, my ears tell me it's better, so therefore I can't let the results or the outcome dictate the value. And I thought that was such a profound way to look at what he does. Because we always look for the likes, the video views, the accolades, the paycheck, whatever it may be, to dictate our value. And he's saying the exact opposite. And I think that's such a huge learning lesson to hear, especially from someone like that who is still putting out music constantly. And he does it because he loves it, not because he has to do it. And that is one of the many takeaways from that conversation, but probably my favorite. The next episode was with a gentleman named Harrell. Tony Harrell I met actually through playing with Vince, and he's a legendary session musician in Nashville. Most of the session work the real heyday of session work was in the 90s. Tony talks about playing for Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, and this is before that even and during that period. But Johnny Cash, all of the legends that you think about, Chris Christopherson, and then Art Garfunkel from Simon and Garfunkel. I grew up listening to a lot of them. And then all the modern day acts. He played on the first 2 Taylor Swift records. And what was interesting from our conversation together, and what I kind of took with me, was this. He said, you need to know who paved the path that went before you. You need to know who the greats are. So no matter what field you're in, if this is art, if this is, if you're a business consultant or you work at a bank, it's like, who were the greats that paved the path to where you got? And I think this does really apply in music and the music business. He said, be a study of them. He says, I tell my team that. I tell my writers that, our artists. And you got to realize, Tony, MV2 is his publishing company. They've had 13 number 1 hit songs in the last 3 years. You don't just accomplish that by not having a great leader at the helm. Hearing him say that has really brought me back to starting to backtrack into my roots more. And I would encourage you to do the same, because we need to know about the ones that came before us. And quite often, history repeats itself. And quite often we see cycles in music or art, and that's called the nostalgia cycle or the nostalgia factor, where you see something come back around. But to predict what's going to come next, I often think you look at what was in the past. Next, episode 3, and this is also, you guys don't have to listen to over 12, 13 hours of podcasting if you didn't get the chance to listen to the last 10. This is with Brian Koppelman. Brian is a really cool guy. We've written songs together, and he is the showrunner of the show Billions. A showrunner is basically the person that wrote the show. So him and his writing partner Dave, they have written Ocean's 13, Rounders. He talks about when everybody in town rejected them, and then they finally sold their first screenplay. Everybody that had rejected them called back the day after it was sold, saying that they wanted to sign them. And he said, basically, the gatekeepers don't know. And I thought that was refreshing, because we always wonder, what does it take? What do I have to do? And then you look back at people like Walt Disney. These are just popping off in my head, but I'm thinking about like Walt Disney. You look at Oprah, who was told that she wasn't fit for television, and Walt Disney wasn't creative enough, and Thomas Edison was stupid or whatever. You look at these people that are told they're dumb, and they're the ones that change the world, and the gatekeepers are the ones that are quite often the ones that say, you're not good enough, this doesn't fit, blah, 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 blah. And then he experienced that in his own career and life. Billions, again, it's been a TV show that I've followed. I've watched every season, and I think they're wrapping up their final season. But he also talks about mental health, and I like to talk about this in a lot of my episodes because it's something that is very near and dear and important to me. I want to destigmatize it, and I've had my struggles with mental health since I was a kid. And I like to think of mental health as like my quad health, like a muscle health. How is your brain any different than the rest of your body? You know, it's like everything comes from your brain, and it is so important to have a healthy brain. And why we have this weird thing about mental health, I do not know. But I will say this. We talked about it, and we talked about the critic, because the critic is so loud in the creative's mind. What Brian does is he meditates twice a day for 20 minutes. And he learned how to do transcendental meditation. And he actually sent me a book after our interview, which I just finished reading. And he said, hit me up when you finish the book, and I'll kind of guide you on your next path. So hopefully he'll be my my TM guru, but he said that's really helped silence that. It doesn't ever go away, but he was having really bad anxiety and it just wasn't feeling right. And now Brian's on this crazy, he just posted a video with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the gym together, but he's on this fitness journey. And he's later in his life doing this, and I'm motivated to get in shape because he's making all these steps towards being healthy, and it helps in the creative process as well. I'm kind of dumbfounded at how culturally we praise people that are not having healthy lifestyles, and I'm not shaming or hating. I think there's a lack of education on things. And I myself was really unhealthy for a long time, and I still eat too much sugar. However, health and fitness is kind of a journey. It's one he's on, it's one I'm on, and it's one that I think a lot of us need to kind of understand and be on. There's a country music artist, Jelly Roll, who was just nominated for what felt like everything at the ACMs, and he seems like he has the biggest heart in the world. And Gary Brecka, who is a kind of biohacker health guy. You might have seen him on TikTok. He's going to start training Jelly Roll, and they have a goal to get him super fit because he's realized that he doesn't feel good in the body he has. And so I just think it's interesting that you see people like him, and deep down inside, they're like, I don't want to feel this way about myself. And so seeing Brian do that and go from being overweight to now he's getting straight up ripped, and he meditates, and he's figured out a really great work-life balance and all these things. It's really inspiring to someone, and it's inspiring to me, someone like myself, I meant to say. Next, we have Eddie Tidwell. Eddie Tidwell is a legend in publishing, music publishing. The real heyday for music publishing was like the heyday for session work, which was the 90s. And that's when basically you could have a great career as a songwriter. And that was a viable career. Now there's a thing called draws, and draws is basically a paycheck. It's like, this is your salary for the year as a songwriter. The draws in the 90s are the same as they are in 2024. So you can make somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 a year for a first-time publishing deal. It's absolutely impossible to live off of that and live in Nashville, or even in a stone's throw of Nashville, downtown. Nowadays, fast forwarding, talking to Eddie, who was the VP of George Strait's publishing company, he's now kind of gone through that metamorphosis of seeing the industry change and is working on developing artists. But my favorite thing from the podcast was something he said. I don't know if he was the first to say it, but he said, musicians come to Nashville because they want to change people's lives. And in order to change people's lives, you need a publishing deal, because publishing companies are now kind of helping to foster talent for the major labels. Or if you have hits and connections with the major artists, you can write with them. And so you can have a publishing deal, but it's all predicated on your relationship with a hit artist. So he says, you have to have a publishing deal. And publishing companies don't care about changing people's lives. They care about hit songs. And they want to get those hit songs to labels and the record labels. Record labels don't care about changing people's lives. They care about getting their songs on the radio. And the radio does not care about changing people's lives. It cares about selling ad time, ad space. Have you ever heard before, coming up next, we have the brand new debut or the brand new song by this artist or that artist? Well, they do that because they want to keep you engaged and they want listener retention to stay high, understandably. But that's how the thing works. And then he says, in all of that, in that whole circle, you come back and you realize that music changes people's lives. In the next episode, we had Craig Campbell. Craig Campbell was on the radio in the years that I was really listening to country radio. And the format of country music's changed a lot, that I really liked when they played Eric Church and those style artists, and Craig was one of them. He was so candid in this interview that he basically goes down to say this, and this is the big takeaway from this episode. if you're interested in the music business. He says, the music business is 100% all about money. Pay to play. Now, payola is illegal, and that is paying radio stations to play your songs. But now they have what are called radio promoters, who are essentially people that go to radio stations to promote your music, to get the stations, the program directors. And Craig talks about how there were program directors that would contact his team and say, like, hey, we're doing a giveaway for some iPads. We need a couple of iPads. And we really want to play Craig's song, like wink, wink. So they'd send him iPads for them to get Craig's song spun. Because in order to get up the charts, you have to have a certain amount of radio stations playing your song at the same time for it to be charting. And so he talks about another story of going and playing a free show when he was out on a hunting trip, and they throw him on an airplane. He's in camo, and he gets there, and they promise they're going to play his song on his new single, and they never did. And he says there's story and story and story again and again and again of things like that happened in my career. And he says, I used to think that it was the one that works the hardest is the successful. But what he realized, it's not about that, and that it really comes down to money and how much you have in order to be a famous entertainer. I had a meeting, this is outside of this Craig Campbell interview, this is just me interjecting as Stephan, with one of the biggest labels in town, and someone I know there, and they're programmed to break an artist, and breaking an artist means basically to make them a household name. Cost them $5 million. So they're making a $5 million investment in you as an artist, and it's going to take at least 3 years. So you got this 3-year, $5 million investment to break a name. But it's just so interesting that the music industry and the music business is not what you think it is. And it's not what young aspiring artists that are moving to Nashville think it is. They think that they can move here and have great songs, look great, sound great, be great players, have the whole package, and then get a publishing a record deal and be famous. And it just doesn't happen like that. And you can be TikTok famous and get a record deal and put a song out and then maybe get dropped, if it doesn't stick. You can have a record deal and be shelved, like one of our guests that we're going to talk about, where they don't do anything with you and you actually have to pay for your own demos. But we'll talk about that in a moment. Next, we have Rob Floyd. He is a celebrity mixologist. He did a whipped cream with Cardi B called Whip Shots, and it's alcoholic whipped cream. It's interesting, in that whole Whip Shots thing, his wife said, you're basically like Martha Stewart and she's basically like Snoop Dogg. That's totally the relationship that they have. He also has been on Bar Rescue for 11 years. That's probably where you've seen him. He's on his 11th season of Bar Rescue. And he does all the cocktails for Princess Cruise Line, the Princess Cruise Line. He does cocktail theater. He is a scientist of mixology. He uses nitrogen to freeze drinks, and he'll turn alcoholic drink into cotton candy and put it on the top of a cocktail. I don't drink, and he made me a mocktail before that was amazing. And he said that the sales and revenue on mocktails has gone up a crazy amount. I forget the numbers. It's in the podcast. But the thing he told me, a couple things, and this is what my big key takeaways from the podcast was, first off, he reads a book a week. He's very into taking care of his body and health. He says, when I travel, I only eat vegetarian because you just never know. And I think he's such a global thinker because he does read so much. He has so much experience. He was 10 years in France under these Michelin star dudes that trained him. And the first cocktail he ever made, the guy just said, this is terrible, and spit it out. And he said it didn't faze him, but he's a wealth of knowledge. And one of the things he said is he talked about that inner critic as well. And he said, the worst thing that you could do for yourself is to criticize yourself. He said self-love And that's a very cheesy term, but I'm not like, think about it. Like loving yourself, how hard is that to do? That is very difficult. He said self-love and self-compassion are the best things that you could do for yourself as a creative person, because mentally inside we have that negative voice that's saying you suck, that's beating us up. And the antidote to that, he argues, and I would agree, is the fact that you say a positive when the negative comes in. You combat that negative with a positive. You have compassion. And in therapy, I learned about the compassionate best friend. And it was basically like this. If you had a friend that was experiencing what you were experiencing, or going through what you were going through, or feeling the way you did, let's say you could clone yourself or have a friend like that. And my name's Stephan, their name's Bob. What would I tell Bob? Would I be like, hey, Bob, you know what? You're doing the absolute best you can right now with the resources you have. You're burnt out. You've been working crazy. You should be proud of yourself. And I don't think we get that permission. And I felt like in that interview, he gave me permission, and hopefully the listeners permission, to take that punching bag off of ourselves and quit hitting ourselves and loving ourselves, because that's how we're going to be better creatives in the long run. Now, some may argue against that, but I believe that in order to have and maintain a career as a business person and an artist, you have to have that. And he has such a good balance on business and art. He says at the end of the day, if all you want to do is art, yeah, okay, go get a job working somewhere else at a grocery store and then do art for fun. But if you're talking about doing art in a creative field for a living, it is very much about money. And you have to figure out how those two things work together. And I love that he talked about that, because that's something that we never talk about in the creative world. And that dovetails into my next episode that I did with a up-and-coming artist, Hannah Dasher. She currently is signed to Sony Nashville for her music publishing. She had a record deal. She was dropped from her record deal after COVID because she didn't fit what was, I guess, their production line, I guess you would say. That's a good thing, because you want to be the first you. You want to be unique, right? The people we remember are the Bob Dylans and the Jimi Hendrixes and the people that came along and were so utterly unique that the whole world remembers them and plays their music and will continue to play their music well after they're gone. And I feel like Hannah Dasher has that originality about her. She's a monster guitar player, a monster songwriter, and she was shelved when she was signed because she was different. Now she got a record deal, but what did that mean? It didn't mean that much other than the fact that she had a record deal. But just because you have a record deal doesn't mean you're going to get famous. If you're an artist out there in the music world, you have to understand that. You really need to read the fine print and have at least 3 entertainment lawyers read your record contract before ever signing. Yeah, I said 3. It's expensive, but it's going to be a very worthwhile investment, because one might miss something and the other might miss something. So having 3 pairs of 3 different eyes on it that have no affiliation with the label, that's very important. But Hannah's now out. She's doing dates with Blackberry Smoke. If you look them up or you don't know who they are, they're amazing. And she's like a rock and roll show, but she's also, her songs that she's writing are up the middle enough, and by that I mean radio friendly enough, they could be on the radio, and they're better than a lot of country songs on country radio, but she does not have the backing of a label because she was dropped from her label. So now she's completely independent. She spent $30,000 last year on hotel expenses. And she talked about how she had to go, and this is where it comes down to, and this is the thing from this episode. It was the self-belief that she had in herself to say, you know what? I got what it takes. I'm good. I'm going to go for this. So she would leave co-writes with her publishing deal that didn't pay very much at all, and then go clean toilets. And then she had to sell her guitars to hire a band to go out and play her music, and has just scraped together the resources to get out and start doing this thing that she's passionate about. And she's digging it out of the clubs, digging it out of the concerts, making fans one person at a time. And I think she's going to be one of the next big artists that comes out of Nashville. And they're going to say, oh, Hannah Dasher is the new artist, right? And I said up and comer, not new artist, because she's not new. She's been here 11 years. But they're going to say, oh, she's a new artist. She's an overnight success. You know, people never see the backstory of the artists. They just see what they are now. So I wish all the best to Hannah. And she's just a rock star, both figuratively and literally. Next, I got to interview Stormy Warren. Now, I listened to Stormy on SiriusXM. This is a highway for as long as I can remember, until I stopped listening to country music because I thought it was too hip-hop. Now, that's my personal opinion, and country's swinging back in a different direction right now, just due to the nostalgia cycle. Stormy and I talked about his career from being a little kid with a radio under his pillow, being passionate about the voices that he heard on the radio. He wanted the songs to get over with so he could hear the disc jockeys talk. And when he was 13, they went on a class field trip, and the teacher said, you know, who has an idea for where we could go? And Stormy raises his hand. He says, this radio station right down the street, it's at this address. And he knew the call numbers and everything for the radio station. And the teacher said, does anybody else have any ideas? And they were all like, well, that sounds cool to us. So he remembers going into that radio station and the smell of coffee and cigarettes and seeing the stacks of the different, I guess they were, I forget what they were called. Maybe it was 8 tracks at the time. And seeing the faders on the console and the microphone and everything that lived behind that, you know, the curtain of Oz, you know, seeing it revealed. The next day after football practice, he went back. He rode his bike there and was like, can I be here? Can I watch? Like, I was here yesterday. And then the lady had to ask the program director. Now, we fast forward into radio, and he had a career at CNN doing interviews. His first interview was Charlie Daniels. He later formed a great bond with Charlie Daniels. Charlie Daniels was the reason that he moved to Nashville, and he actually did the eulogy at Charlie Daniels' funeral. So he was the biggest fan of Charlie. His first record he ever bought was Charlie Daniels. His first interview was Charlie. They became great friends. He moved to Nashville because of Charlie Daniels. I found that was so interesting because he had a mentor, and we talk about mentorship and the importance of it. It's something that is a vein through a lot of successful people. I mean, Rob Floyd had chef mentors. Vince Gill had mentors, great mentors. Stormy, amazing mentors. And he really followed his dream and his passion. He didn't really care what the ramifications were necessarily. He took a huge pay cut when he went to SiriusXM at some point when they merged, because there was Sirius and then there was XM, and they merged. And his pay got cut in half. But he stuck with it because he knew there was something there. He ended up growing it to be the biggest country station, I believe, to be in the United States, maybe worldwide, and he had the belief in it. And one of the things I love about him is that he has always believed in the artist and the songwriter, and was responsible for helping break the careers of many unsigned artists that would come on the show because they were not a AM FM terrestrial radio channel. So he could bring people on that didn't have record deals. And now he's Garth Brooks is his boss, and he's at the Big 615, which is a station on TuneIn, and he has that same ability there. He's just a wealth of knowledge. And the interesting thing, and this is what I wanted to hone on with the last point from that episode, Clinton signed what was called the Telecommunications Act. I believe it was in 1996, and it allowed conglomerates to buy up independent radio stations. And what that did was it basically turned radio from someone being able to be a program director and decide what was played on their station, like the early days when Stormy started, to now a very select few group of people deciding what is played on radio across the entire United States. At the time, he said he didn't really think much about it. He said, I was never really interested in the business side. But he has seen and he saw how it impacted radio and the disc jockey's ability to play the song that they want, because really all they are is a talking head for the songs that they're told to play. That's where radio has been and where it's at. That's again why he's stuck with Sirius XM, and that's why he's on Garth's channel, the Big 615, because he has creative freedom, and I really respect him for that. I want him to be one of my mentors, wink wink. Because I watched a documentary on Dan Rather, and Dan got really good at talking because he did a lot of radio pieces. And one of the things I'm learning in this podcast is how to talk, how to listen, how to draw things out of people. And a lot of people call it a dance. An interview's a dance. And I'm trying to learn, and I am learning that dance. And you do it by logging the hours and the reps. There's nothing or no one better to learn it from than someone who has logged those hours. Mentorship is the mentors that have gone and done what you want to do before you, so you can learn from their mistakes so you don't have to learn them yourself. My most recent episode is with Matt Paskert, and this was last week. He's Morgan Wallen's photographer. So I went and I saw Matt perform his photography skills at night one of Morgan Wallen's sold-out stadium tour at Nissan Stadium here in Nashville. He sold over like 150, 160,000 tickets in 3 nights. And Matt is his personal photographer. And Matt's just a super cool dude. His wife is due for their second baby any day now. She might even be having the baby right now. Who knows? But we talk about mental health, and he has struggled with it to the point where he went to a program where it was like a 9 to 5 kind of a thing. He gets real vulnerable about it, and he's now medication free. And he's really taking care of his health and his body. And it was another one of those people that I found in the creative world that deals with mental health stuff. And we talk about that destigmatizing of mental health. And we talk about creativity. And he's always trying to better himself. He says, the interesting thing is every night they're trying to make the show the same. So you go to a stadium, they pretty much look the same for the most part. You know, these football stadiums. They set up, they have 30-something semis, and every night they're trying to make that show the same as it was the night before. And as a photographer, he's trying to make it different every night. And one of the things I shared with him is something I learned from Rob Floyd in our interview, which was people like to hear stories. They want to hear a story. Facts tell, stories sell. Well, Rob had taken it a step further. He said, not only stories, secrets. People like secrets. And Matt said his favorite photos are the ones backstage. He said, you can't buy a ticket to that. What's going on right before Morgan goes out on stage? It'll be like him, Morgan, and another guy, and they're standing back there. And those are where you get the shots that you can't buy a ticket to that really can creatively impact the world. He was the one that took the picture of Morgan Wallen when Morgan had cut his hair. That first photo that came out of Morgan was one that Matt took. And right before that, Matt got attacked by a dog. His leg was bleeding. So he's bleeding down his leg. He had just got attacked by a dog. And he's out there shooting. They're doing this huge spread for Billboard on Morgan Wallen and, you know, his rise and fame and all that. And he snaps that photo. That became a photo that got over 1 million likes on Morgan's Instagram. And people all called it the cop photo because he had a mustache and his hair was shorter. But it was just really interesting talking to Matt because we talked about family and the troubles or trials or tribulations of being on the road. He was gone in Canada for a month straight, didn't see his family, his little boy, his wife. His wife works, you know. She comes home. It's on her to, you know, watch the kid. The road is a hard place. It's a hurry up and wait place. It's a lot of downtime place. And so the realities of that and the touring life are very difficult. And Matt had some good suggestions for like wives of touring husbands, or like a group where women could get together when their husbands are out of town, they have kids, and it was a really cool idea. But you can go back and listen to that whole episode. But it's very interesting to hear about how Morgan Wallen is such a great guy in person, off the stage, off the camera, even though the public eye loves to watch someone fall from grace. No one's perfect. And so he talks about how great of a guy Morgan is. Sings his praises, in fact. I thought that was interesting. As we wrap up, I just want to thank everybody that has been involved in listening to this podcast. And a special thanks to my wife, Haley, who helps make all of these episodes possible by being there, being behind the camera. She's a rock star. Get after it. Peace.